Go all out there.
But
Has an executive session at 4 o'clock on the 8th, so if we were, we'd need to do either 2 or 3 on the 8th.
Okay, it's 4 p.m. and we're ready to convene the most exciting thing in the world is our budget development workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is our third and final workshop, unless we have other questions that we want to bring up after this. This brings up more, but as you know, we're trying to budget in a very uncertain time, as we've talked about in the past. It's not the future is not very predictable at this point in time, so I think the budget that we're giving you guys and ladies so far has been a very conservative approach to our revenues and our expenses. We're trying to toe the line wherever we can, and it's kind of expecting not the worst, but kind of hitting the middle of the road. So like I say, it's an uncertain time and not an easy time to budget, but that's when you don't get crazy with your budgeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandy, and she's going to shoot through a couple of things that we changed, and then it's going to be up to you guys to talk about whatever you want to talk about as far as the budget is concerned, and go from there.
And this is actually our second workshop. We delayed our first workshop into June because of the COVID. There will be an opportunity if the board desires to have a third workshop prior to the first public hearing. You would need to vote on that at the regular meeting tonight if you wanted to have that third workshop. I also noted that in the regular meeting, the county attorney has an item for an executive session at 4 o'clock, so we would need to do it prior to that executive session, assuming that passes. But like David said, we're just going to walk through the changes that have been made since we turned the budget over to you on July 15th. Most of these changes are going to be either related to our June 30th of the current fiscal year actuals and kind of adjusting our projections and where we're going to end the year with cash. And then we have a couple grants that have come forward in the last couple weeks that have been included in the budget, and so those have been added in proposed budget for next fiscal year as well. So in the general fund, our cash forward use increased by $94,000, and that's a combination of two things. We've added a part-time position to our probation department. That's going to be 24 hours a week. That's a non-benefited position, although we do have to pay FRS on that if we make that a permanent position, and once it goes past 6 months, it is considered a permanent position for FRS purposes. And then the other change in our cash is due to the transfer to the property appraiser's office of $75,000 to fund a reserve line. I think we want to skip past that for now, and we'll come back to that at the end because I think that will require some discussion. So moving along in our state housing initiative program fund, that's our SHIP program. On the 8/3 meeting, you approved a budget amendment and resolution that relates to a rental payment and mortgage assistance program. It's part of the CARES Act funding that's been sent down through the SHIP program, and so we're including that in next year's budget. That's $241,000 in grant funds, and then that'll be paid out to people that apply for that program through GSG, and they'll establish all that and handle it. Our FEMA funds, mainly this is kind of a realignment of things that now we're more certain of than we were earlier in the year, which is our Woolly Park Pier and our Masha Sands Pier, that we're going to see some type of funding, and so we're just moving that funding around, adding in the $3.2 million, which is Masha Sands, right, the 3.2, and then moving that from a maintenance and repair to a capital outlay line. Our court fees, our $2 court information technology fund, we're increasing that cash and the reserve that goes with it on the other side, and that's just based on where we are June 30th, me projecting we're going to have a little more cash on hand than what we thought back when we had our May numbers. Criminal Justice Fees Fund, we have a new pass-through funding that's going to come to the BOCC. The sheriff's office is, when they do joint law enforcement seizures of property, personal property with other agencies, when that property is liquidated, the sheriff's office gets to have a portion of that funding. So it used to be that that could go directly to the sheriff, and somewhere along the lines this year they have changed the rules that the Board of County Commissioners needs to be the custodian for those funds, but then the sheriff's office will request them and will transfer that over to them. So that's just kind of a, accounting change. It was going to them, now it's coming to us and just passing to them as the custodian. Also in here there is, let's see, E911 funds. That's a change that's based on our projected year-end balance, based on our June 30th actuals. And then you'll see on the expense side that our contracted services increased. E911 funds allow for some deep cleaning of the communications center, so we just moved that over from reserve so that the sheriff's office can have their center cleaned in light of the COVID-19. Impact fee fund and corrections, we obviously have the work camp program going, the work camp construction going right now, so we're chewing down on those impact fees, and so based on what we've spent this year, that cash forward is going to decrease a little bit for next fiscal year. 1 cent sales tax funds, these are strictly because David and I finally had the opportunity to get together and kind of marry up our dueling spreadsheets and look to see where we are in the current year and what we've already done, what projects have been completed, what equipment's been purchased. So the majority of these changes, other than we have the loan payment in the facilities fund, and that's for our fire and EMS station, so we have that principal and interest payment. That was everything when we turned over the budget to you on 1 cent sales tax was either revenue, cash, or just a reserve, because we hadn't really went through and specified projects and different things for the, we just had an estimate of what we were going to collect and what our budget, total budget authority was going to be to spend. So we're kind of narrowing in on those things now. Also in our public facility fund, our SCBA lease purchase, you approve that in this fiscal year. The first payment will be due next fiscal year, so we have that programmed in there to be able to make that principal and interest payment. Our wastewater operating fund, we had quite a large transfer set up in there for any residual that was going to be in the River Sink Water Fund. But based on what we've closed out with the River Sink well this year. We've just cut the final check to pay the contractor, and so there's going to be very little residual there after we do that, so we don't need to have that large transfer out of River Sink into the wastewater fund, so that's going to go away. The access fee fund, that same thing. If there is any residual left in the River Sink Water Fund, it will go into our access fee fund because that's all where all of our assets are.
And what you call that as residual is the over the money that we had sitting in the fund over and beyond the sale, that residual amount.
The wastewater USCA grant fund, that's based on our current grant balance of $1.4 million, so we're aligning that to what's actually left, and that's what will be used to fund our interim project that we're working with USCA to get approved to move forward with the award right now. And then in our Restore Act wastewater funds, we've included that funding for Lift Station 76 engineering. That's about $300,000. And then we just talked about River Sink. So those are the changes that have been made since the budget was turned over to you on July 15th. I think probably the most substantial thing in here that's not just a routine transaction is related to the property appraiser's office. We did receive a budget from them on Friday of last week showing what they want. They are expecting the BOCC to fund to the property appraiser's office, and our proposed transfer to them was $1.1 million to the property appraiser's office. They are throwing out a number that is about $100,000 higher, so just under 1.2. We did set up a conference call with DOR, and we're going to speak to them tomorrow at 2:30 just to kind of get an idea and walk through with them, how did you come to this figure? Because we budget too, we want to know what their strategy was and see if there's a possibility at this time to have them come down to our number. Now, our backup plan for right now is that gap between our 1.1 and their 1.2. We want to set that aside in a reserve line, and it's included in the budget as of right now. That way the new incoming property appraiser has the opportunity to come to the board at any time during the fiscal year and request that reserve be included in their transfer. But we'll start off the year going forward with, you'll get a quarter of $1.1 million each quarter of the year unless it's requested by the incoming property appraiser and approved by the board.
Now that was the property appraiser's budget that was approved by DOR that they submitted to DOR.
Yes, but there have been several iterations of that. It originally started out just under $1.3 million, and then we worked with James on the reduction of the position for the special assessment coordinator, and that's been adjusted by DOR. And so since the beginning of what he originally submitted, it's down about $73,000. Obviously, we wanted about a $140,000 cut, so we're kind of halfway there, and that hopes that we can speak with DOR tomorrow and get some reasoning as to why they didn't come down a little further and what their method was for determining that final budget that they approved.
Basically, what DOR did is they allowed us to take out the positions in the contract.
Not the money that was
not the 3 years of overpaying and all the other stuff that went on. They ignored that.
Is that final with them?
That's what their letter says.
But we're gonna find out in the morning, or tomorrow afternoon at 2:30. To be honest.
But that's the whole purpose of.
Push back.
We need to, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna no joke. I'm gonna want the director to come up here. I'm gonna tell him I want him to sit up here and talk to y'all and tell y'all why. Tell taxpayers why. Please.
Excellent idea.
Well, and I think our assertion to them is going to be that you, as the board, are the entity with the information, the best information to make this decision, rather than some large agency high in the sky that's not familiar with our particular situation and doesn't understand what goes on around here in our economy and things like that. So I just think as a matter of them being so large, they are rubber stamping property appraisers' budgets because they do it for 67 counties, and it's impossible for them to have the unique knowledge that's necessary for them to make a decision about Wakulla. And then you compare that to a Marion County or some, they're apples and oranges, and I think that they're just moving things through the process without the best information to make the best decision.
David, I'll be glad to come and sit in on that meeting if you think it'll help. I don't mind speaking for the board if the board would like that. And
That's up to you and the board, but trust me.
I think that's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. What time?
2:30.
2:30.
David will be the lead man though, right? Just be there to say.
I'm gonna talk ugly to them.
We have talked ugly to them
Yeah,
a couple times.
I picked a couple trash cans, so.
Well,
2:30.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason that money was in the reserves is because this board made the decision that constitutionals could keep their own reserves, and if they come in under budget, they can stockpile that money for their future use. Had we not made that decision, that money wouldn't have been there for him to take to start with. And
Well, it was included as part of, they're included as a transfer to them. Because the property appraiser's office does their own financials, they actually get a quarterly infusion of cash. And it's up to them at the end of the fiscal year to reconcile everything and say, okay, I didn't spend this $50,000. Let me send it back to the board. Even if they wouldn't have had their own fund, it would have still needed to be returned. And it was being returned. They haven't returned anything since 15-16 when all the excitement started. And so, they were actually getting that cash transferred into to their bank account. And so it was a little different situation because they were.
And I still like, I don't want to change that. I'm still glad that we did that, and I want to keep that, but it set up the situation where it could be abused in this case.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
All right, moving right along.
That's what I had. There's been very little changes. We put a good budget before you guys on July 15th, and anything that comes up between now and the first public hearing, I do want to point out, Jess, if you could go to number 6 on the PDF there. Yeah, I think it's attachment 1. So this is the actual advertisement, although the numbers may change slightly between now and when we advertise our final public hearing. This will appear in the Wakulla News on September 17th, so this is what the citizens are actually going to see when they open the newspaper, alongside a notice of proposed tax increase. And that goes back to the fact that we are asking for the board to approve an 8.0000 millage rate, and our rollback is 7.7022. So anytime we do not use that rollback, we're required by DOR to advertise that notice of
While you're in the
proposed
meeting, why don't you get
tax
to change that stupid rule?
increase. Oh, how I would love to.
That was the legislature that did that.
I would love to, but just so you're aware, that's what your citizens are going to see, so you may get contacted, what is this proposed tax increase? Which is very contradictory, because the very top of this advertisement says your operating expenditures are 2.5% less.
Yeah.
And so unless they really understand the maneuvering that goes on here, because the notice of proposed tax increase relates only to the millage rate, that's it. This 2.5% is comparing our current fiscal year budget to our proposed fiscal year budget for next year, and that's where that calculation is. They make you advertise these adjacent to each other, and they probably are very confusing to most people, but this is where we are, and so just be aware that this is what your citizens are going to see, and it may prompt some questions.
It'd be nice if they'd at least let you account for inflation or cost.
There's a lot of things that would be nice in DOR land. And then the page attachment 3 is the budget by fund. That's going to be what, when we do our tentative and final budget, that's your Exhibit A that goes to Department of Revenue, that breaks everything out by individual fund. That will not be advertised in the newspaper. That's just for your information. And other than that, that was what I had to talk about.
I saw something, I don't know if it was a fact brief that we got that said, and Randy, you went to the CRT. What I read was that the state was expecting like 320 something million dollars, I think it was million, in lost revenue for DOT. I don't know how.
Billions.
Is it billions? 323
Article in
billion.
the newspaper about 5.4 billion.
About 10% of their construction budget,
Yeah.
mainly going back to gas tax.
And that's what we're feeling that, as I told you guys before, it's our revenue sharing is down, but almost an equal hit is hit the road department. It's already down as of the last information Kelly sent out from July, which is May. Gas tax revenues is down. We're year to date down $163,000.
And that's because we just get a portion of the statewide.
Yeah, and not because of local, but because of statewide. So you're seeing.
It's our out-of-state business.
That's right. You're seeing the out-of-state business effect. And this is the second month this is hit like this, so it seems to be rolling now along this track. And if that's so, then we're really going to have to. That'll tighten up. The good news is we have reserves to in the road fund to handle it, but yet it's something that we've got to really watch.
As far as the state revenue sharing, have we got a feel for
So far,
how much it may impact us?
it's down about 13-14%, somewhere in there, but we're so far we brought it up with some other revenues, and in the future, next year this year it'll make an effect. Next year it's going to make a bigger effect to a degree, but if it'll come back and sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll be okay. But in the long, 3 to 5 years down the road, it's going to really affect us hard.
Everything I've read, it says 5 years before we.
It'll have an effect on us. So
Indicated around it ending now, but as that continues, that 5 year goes out. So
But so far, we're lucky. We're really set up and diversified our revenue streams to where we're not, like a lot of counties are looking, and cities are looking at large tax increases and from all over the board, and we're not recommending any of that stuff.
Since we got a lot of time, I hate to ask this, but just so I want to make sure the public understands, can you just briefly explain the rollback rate and why, you know, we're staying at the same millage rate, but explain to the public again how that works with the rollback and it's actually a slight increase.
Yep, I can do that. So the easiest way to do it is to put a simple number on it. So if last year our values were $1 million and our millage rate was 8, this year our values increased to $1.2 million. Whatever adjustment we would need to make to that millage rate to get us the same exact amount of money, that's our rollback rate. And so we talked about it last time about sales tax is a good equivalent. If the price of your TV goes up, you still pay 7% tax. You pay more, but you're paying the same tax. And that's basically what we're doing with the 8.0 millage rate, because that's what our millage rate is currently.
And the key thing to me is the rollback rate assumes none of the county's expenses go up the next year.
Right.
Health insurance doesn't go up.
Workers'
commodities
comp,
don't go up,
liability, all
wages
that.
don't go up, insurance doesn't go up, and we all know that's not reality. If it was, we could still be operating on a 1982 county budget.
Well, maybe not 1982,
Carry it back, we've had a rollback rate for a long
but
time.
that might have been at 10 mills way back then, who knows?
Every time I look, most of the taxes for individual properties now are still less than they were 2009, 2010. So we still haven't gotten back to what people were paying, even though their values are going up, almost without exception.
That's
Thing about the
correct.
crash,
Where's
too.
Greg's little spreadsheet?
I know in my house, it went down pretty hard.
Yeah.
The value did, but it can only go up 3%, which is your home, it's a homestead. So I'm not happy with my tax bill.
Okay?
Well, and I
Take it
think
back.
that 3% is what's keeping it from recovering at the same speed
Better
that
than
it
it
crashed
would,
down.
yeah.
Because your value has probably regained, but they can go up no more than 3% per year.
Okay, any citizens like to comment on the budget workshop? I see a few faces I don't know, and most of them are county employees,
That's fine.
hoping they get their budgeted amount, but anybody want to comment? Anybody's welcome, okay? Any other commissioners have any
I had
comments?
a couple of things. You did notice that it's 2.5% less that we're spending, okay, next year as opposed to this year. So we're actually being more efficient with citizens' money. And we are the criminal justice fee funds. We're the custodian. Are there any, do we have anything we have to watch out as that moves forward on how, we're now responsible for it in some shape, form, or fashion. So how does that change what's going on?
We're just responsible to be the custodian of the funding. The sheriff's office is still required to make sure they do the reporting, make sure what they spend the money on is appropriate to the program. That responsibility still falls on them. We're simply just the bank.
Like we'd have some responsibility if we know.
Also, we don't need to forget, one of the programs that we were going to introduce this year prior to COVID we would talk about the sheriff's increase and trying to make some type of salary adjustment. That will be, obviously, this is not the year to do that, but we've had conversations with Jared and with Sheriff, and he is on board for next year trying to do something. So therefore, we're going to be working all year to try to see what we can do and how we can pay for that. Right now, the only way that we had to pay for it would be to increase our ad valorem for that, but we got to wait and see how this year ends and see how we roll into next year, see what happens in November with the election as far as the ICE is concerned. So there's a lot of variables in there for right now, but we need to just keep that in the back of our heads that we had have that conversation
We
with
just
him.
did an increase not too long ago so he could get new positions.
That's right, that's right.
How's the ICE revenue doing?
ICE revenue is going along. We will not hit budget this year. We'll fall, as far as, we'll hit budget, but we won't hit what we had, the 3 million that we were shooting
Yeah.
for.
Won't build his reserve up much.
Well,
We'll
hit some.
Some, but we were planning on putting 1.2 surplus in there above the budget, and we're probably gonna be about 800,000.
Mhm. Yeah, he's gonna roll in about
Has he
2.
hit fund balance yet?
He's been at fund
Mhm,
balance, yes.
mhm.
Now, what is the intention to do with that excess money? Because I've always encouraged Jared, if he can give people might not like this idea, but if he could give a bonus to his employees a year. in-
Well, that's something he and I were gonna talk about. We've talked about getting together and talking about a plan like that for him, but I think he's probably on the same line as I am as far as this, the kind of waiting to see what happens in November.
Are officers being poached like they were last year?
Excuse me?
Are the people being recruited from us to go up to?
It's probably, it sounds like it's along the same rate that we get, that Louis gets, I should say. So it's according to the numbers I got from Jared, it's about, that's one of the things that ebbs and flows. Now, it does affect the sheriff more because of the structure that he has with his overtime, et cetera, the way he pays all that out, and his structure is a little different. We can be a little more competitive due to overtime than he can. So, but yes, he does have his share of poaching that goes on.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the cost of training last year. You know, you could give significant raises to most of the staff, and if that kept them here, okay, you would have saved money.
Mhm.
So we really need to work that out.
Well, and that's the reason we've had discussions with him on, line deputies, increasing those salaries and not taking it on up the line and just leaving that the line deputies, and he has agreed to that. So
Everyone else makes less than X amount of money.
that's right.
By line, you mean
Yeah, your
Front line.
front line, yeah.
One's on the road.
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion on the workshop?
Just one more thing, Commissioner Thomas was talking about the values, and Greg just actually sent us this fabulous Excel that does a little comparison. So in fiscal year 07-08, our final gross taxable value countywide was $1,571,000,000. And then this last year, we're at $1,295,000,000. So you're right, it's still not come back to where it used to be.
It was probably way overinflated then anyway.
I'm not saying that, but what we can tax on,
When
that
somebody
number
pays
is still
50
not.
grand for a vacant lot in Panacea Park, something's wrong.
Free market.
Well, non-sustainable for the market, that one was.
Greg's spreadsheet's still not as good as mine, but that's okay.
And that was when the coastal market was booming, I think, just before the real crash, so.
Okay, so hearing no more discussion, we'll adjourn the workshop and come back at 5 PM for the regular meeting. Thank y'all.
I tried to take a video.